My pleasure to introduce Ashik Hudabuksh, who is a project scientist in the LTI with Tom Mitchell. But before that, he was a postdoc mentored by Jaime Carbonell, and he did his PhD thesis here, also advised by Jaime Carbonell, who, as Lori mentioned, was the founder of the LTI and director, whom we lost untimely early this year. He also mentioned I'm one of his earliest collaborators. I became a student in 1986 in the earliest days of the Center for Machine Translation, which became the LTI. And at that time, the CMT had a couple of cubicles in Wien Hall 3207, and we've grown considerably since then. So it's my pleasure to let Ashik tell us on his work on the intersection of low resource natural language processing and AI for social impact by telling us how to surface positivity amid state. Ashik?
Thanks, Trev, for this kind introduction, and thanks, Lori, for giving me the opportunity to present the work that I did with Jaime. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the LTI Colloquium first talk in the fall 2020 season. The title of the talk is Hope Speech and Help Speech, Surfacing Positivity Amidst Hate. It's a joint work with Srifani Palukodeti and Jaime Carbonell. And I would like to take clarification questions during the talk, and after the talk, we can have more discussions about the topic that I'll be covering. So I would like to start with one of my favorite poets, Wisława Szymborska. She's a Polish Nobel laureate. Her poem called The Courtesy of the Blind. And in the poem, there is a poet who goes to a reading event in a blind college. And as she looks at the first poem in her own book, she notices that there is a color mentioned in the poem. So she flips onto the next page. She finds that there is a texture mentioned. She moves to the next one, there is a shape mentioned. And soon she realizes that she hasn't written a single poem that her visually challenged audience can appreciate in its entirety. And the main message that I understood from the poem is the first step towards an inclusive environment is to be aware of a disadvantaged group's existence. And no wonder why inclusion, fairness, representation, bias, these terms are very important in modern machine learning and AI systems. So this talk is divided into three parts. The first part, we talk about the problem, the challenge of including minorities or minority perspectives in discussion about them. And when we talk about minorities, it could be ethnic minority, religious minority, or political minority. It could be minority along the health and gender spectrum. It could be even intellectual minority. But in this paper, we particularly focused on the Rohingyas, an ethnic minority in Myanmar, stateless since 1982. Nearly 742K Rohingyas got displaced in the last 10 years. So this is one of the most major humanitarian crises that happened in the last decade. Major ethics organizations reported brutal state-sponsored violence against them. However, Myanmar, the alleged oppressors, they denied any such ethnic cleansing effort. So our work is not about Rohingyas' citizenship rights or Myanmar's alleged role in their operation. What we focused is something that we would call a 21st century problem, a migrant crisis in the era of internet. But suddenly a disadvantaged group gets thrust into a global discussion. People are rapidly forming opinions about them, but they may not be present to contribute to that opinion. And their sparse presence may stem from a linguistic barrier. Most likely the discussions are happening in a global language, and maybe they are not proficient at that. It could be lack of internet access, or it could be the very basic survival struggle. They are just so busy to run for their lives they don't have time to check what's being discussed about them on Twitter or on Facebook. Now, the adverse effect, the internet can be very harsh if you cannot defend yourself. So these are some example posts, social media posts that we obtained that talks about the Rohingya refugee community. And you can see that these are not very positive things. In fact, if we do a simple word cloud visualization of the most frequent token following the phrase Rohingyas are, or the most frequent token following the phrase send them to, we see again that the perception and the opinions are largely negative. Many people believe that they are illegals. Many people think they are terrorists. And we were alarmed to see that in the phrase send them to, hell was also chosen as very frequent options. So the adverse effect of online hate can be twofold. First, the bystanders who are just exposed to hateful content, they may start forming prejudice. And the second thing is there could be a close causal link between online violence and offline violence. And recent work has shown that online hateful content targeted towards refugee community has often influenced offline violence. Now, the research question that we are interested in, how can AI help a disenfranchised minority? So typically, a large body of literature has been devoted to blocking and detecting and blocking negative content. And we have a huge body of work on hate speech detection, previous work. In this work, we focused on how about detecting and amplifying the positive content. So we all have faced this situation when we were not present and someone was telling some mean thing about us and one friend stood up for us and saying that, you know, that's not how he is. So can AI be that responsible friend and detect help speech, aka voice for the voiceless, like content that is championing a disenfranchised minority? So help speech classifier is essentially a nuanced classifier that automatically detects comments supporting the Rohingyas. So one subclass could be comments that seek organizational help. One could be condemning the alleged oppressor. It could be about expressing empathy. It could be about vocalizing for the rights for the Rohingyas, and so on and so forth. For our data, we focused on YouTube, and our choice of YouTube was informed by the fact that it is one of the most popular social media platforms in South Asia. And our data set is 263 comments, 63K comments on 5,000 videos posted by more than 100K users. So it's a text data set of comments posted by users responding to videos relevant to the Rohingya refugee crisis. Now, before I go into the technical details, I'd like to emphasize a subtle point. Help speech is not absence of hate speech. So if some comment is marked as help speech, it's certainly not hate speech, but the inverse is not true. Not hate speech does not necessarily imply help speech. For example, take this comment, India is already overpopulated. We do not have enough resources for the Rohingyas. This is definitely not hate speech. And at the same time, it's not helping the disenfranchised minority in any way. So it's not help speech either. So these two different classifiers actually serve very different purposes, and both are very important. Now, the first set of challenges that we faced while tackling this problem are the linguistic challenges. So India is, like South Asia is very linguistically diverse. India alone has 22 languages recognized by its constitution. And if you add other South Asian countries in the mix, the number will be much larger than that. When we take YouTube videos and we consider comments relevant to videos relevant to the Rohingya refugee crisis, we can enforce some kind of topical focus in the discussion. However, extracting a monolingual corpus is a huge challenge. And then this region, we have majority of the speakers who do not speak English as their first language. So we saw a lot of grammar and spelling disfluencies and phonetic spelling errors. Take this example. It's a bit hurting that all the developed countries are sailfish. So you can guess that sailfish is probably selfish, but hurting, depending on if it is heartening or hurting, it will completely change the meaning of the sentence. So these are some kind of challenges we faced, and any help speech classifier that we want to build, we would have to be robust to this kind of grammar and spelling disfluencies. Now, now comes the machine learning challenges. We all know that in order to build an effective training set, we would like our training set to be balanced so that if it's a binary classification task, there are enough positives and enough negatives. And also if it's diverse so that it represents the distribution in the wild reasonably well. One big problem is we are trying to detect help speech, and in this case, positives are rare. So if we just randomly sample our dataset, we will roughly get 10% help speech. More so, we need to find enough also positive for better balance, and also help speech has a nuanced definition with multiple positive subclasses. So ideally, we would like to have samples that span all positive subclasses and also negative subclasses for the negatives. So in a way, it becomes like a circular problem. We would need to find positives to discover more positives. So we need enough positives to build a classifier to detect more positive examples. So it kind of becomes like a circular problem. I can stop at this point if anyone has any question, or everything is fine till now. Okay. So a little bit of background on word embeddings. Word embeddings are continuous representation of words in high dimensional space. And words with similar meanings are typically placed near to each other in the resulting embedding. And polyglot skipgram word embeddings is skipgram embeddings trained on a single multilingual corpus. So now I will be presenting a very interesting and useful result. It's almost post hoc obvious, but we found that polyglot embeddings discover language clusters. So if we train a polyglot skipgram word embedding, and then for each document, we compute a document embedding by taking the average, normalized average of all the word embeddings. And then if we cluster them, they show precise monolingual clusters. For example, in the right, we have 21 European languages. We mix the whole, like the corpus is completely mixed with 21 European languages. We train polyglot word embeddings. And then when we cluster them, we see 21 precise clusters. And for noisy social media data on the left side, we have YouTube comments from Oriya TV. So Oriya is a province in India. And when we learn polyglot word embeddings on that data set, and we cluster them, we again see the clusters show it's not as good as the European languages set, because Europarl is like a well-formed text data set, and this is noisy social media. But we can still see that linguistic separation is possible using this technique. The reason this technique is very powerful is because it's largely unsupervised. So the clustering step is unsupervised. And when we try to assign language label to a cluster, all that we have to do, we have to just randomly sample 10 documents from the cluster, annotate their language, and whatever is the majority language label, we assign that language to that particular cluster. So, so suppose we need 10 documents per cluster. That means we just had to annotate 210 documents for these 21 European languages and 40 documents for these 4 Indian languages. So it's extremely annotation efficient. And the other reason this technique is very useful is there are many languages spoken in India that don't have commercial support, like Google language identifier would not be able to detect it. Suppose you're dealing with Assamese. It's a language spoken by more than 10 million speakers in India, but Google doesn't support it currently. So if you want to work on any social problem or any problem that concerns Assamese, detecting the language in itself will be a huge challenge. And with our technique, we can solve it very efficiently. So using we call this algorithm L-polyglot, and using this in our data set, we identified Burmese, German, Bengali, French, Arabic, Hindi, Malay in the non-English part. And we removed those non-English part of the corpus. And for the rest of our analysis, we focus on the English corpus. So now we come to our second question. How do we find enough positives to build a robust classifier? So recall, so we have multiple active learning, we choose two different tactics. One is multiple active learning strategies to boost number of positives and construct a balanced data set. And we propose a novel active sampling technique to find diverse positives. And I'll talk about each of these strategies one after one. So some background for active learning. So active learning is a very well-known technique to efficiently accumulate labeled data. The key philosophy is all data points are not equally useful. So if we let the learner choose which data points to label, most likely she will be choosing efficiently, and the whole data accumulation process will be expedited and more efficient. And some known sampling strategies are uncertainty sampling, where the learner is requesting label for the samples, where she is most confused about, the learner or the classifier. And density-based sampling, where the classifier is focusing on the dense region of the data, and then she's just choosing samples from those dense region. It could be one-sided extreme or certainty sampling also. I'll talk about this technique later. So a typical active learning pipeline looks like this. We start with a seed set, we train a model, we use the model to request labels from unlabeled pool of data using a sampling strategy. And then we expand the data set with newly acquired labels. And this process keeps getting repeated until a halting criteria is met. And one reasonable halting criteria is probably your classifier is performing well enough, or you're running out of labeling budget. But that's the basic pipeline of active learning. And following theoretical result that appeared in 2013 New Tips, we used the batch active learning setting, where in each batch we choose, the learner chooses a set of samples to be labeled. In order to make this process more efficient, we chose batch active learning setting. So now we focus on how to start with a seed set. So recall that help speech has a nuanced definition, and a seed set containing, ideally we would like to have a seed set that contains a diverse set of examples satisfying all subclasses. So what we do is we start with an example for each of the subclasses, and then we find nearest neighbors in the comment embedding space. So if we think about the positive help speech, suppose the subclass is organizational help, and an example comment could be UN should help the Rohingyas. It could be advocating for rights. An example comment could be Rohingyas should get Myanmar citizenship. It could be expressing empathy. It could be value the humanity. They are migrating for lives, not for luxury. So the idea is for each of these subclasses, we will do nearest neighbor sampling. So in the document embedding space, which means if our seed comment is UN should help the Rohingyas, we hope to find something like we should seek organizational help for Rohingyas. Maybe UN is a good choice. Some kind of example comment that will be a nearest neighbor to this seed comment. Now the reason these top two comments are written in blue and the bottom comment is written in orange is because the orange comment is coming from the real data set, and the top two comments are proposed by the annotator. So our scheme is, if the annotators, after quickly looking through the data set, does not find any example that satisfies any of the subclasses, she is allowed to come up with her own example comment to start the process. So when we do nearest neighbor sampling, we are sampling from the data set, but the first few examples can come from the annotators, because since this is a rare class, we may not have an example to start with. So that's why this technique is very helpful, because annotator can also come up with her own example, use this as a seed set, and then start sampling from the data set. Now, when it came to negative help speech, we did not have that problem of not being able to find any example comment for any of the subclasses. So if it was calls for violence, we had comments like Pakistan, please nuke Myanmar Buddhists. If it supports the alleged oppressor, well done Myanmar. And we found this interesting class, what we called whataboutism. So we found this pattern that if there is a one disadvantaged community, a lot of people will just come and say, what about some other disadvantaged community? They are also suffering. As if sufferings of one disadvantaged community can be just justified and explained by suffering of another disadvantaged minority. So we call this class of comments whataboutism. And I would also mention here that in the calls for violence, Pakistan, please nuke Myanmar Buddhists, the violence is being called against the alleged oppressor, Myanmar. But in our help speech definition, calling for violence against anyone is not allowed. So no matter if it's Myanmar or the Rohingyas, calling for violence is example of negative help speech. So in our active sampling technique, the key advantages are, as I already said, examples need not to come from the data set. So it's very useful for rare classes. And then since we use subword information in our in computing our document embeddings, our technique was robust to spelling variations and errors. And that's very important if you want to work in South Asian NLP. And since we started with one example for each of the subclasses and then perform nearest neighbor sampling, we had better subclass representations. Now let's focus on the third step of the active learning pipeline. What kind of sampling strategy we use, so the learner can use to choose unlabeled samples from the pool of data that still needs labeling. The typical strategy in active learning is uncertainty sampling, where the learner requests labels for which the learner is most unsure about. In rare class problems, certainty sampling is an often adopted strategy, where suppose you want to have more positives in your example, in your training data set, what you will do is you will try to request labels for all those data points where the classifier has very high confidence that it's a positive example. So this is basically a way to jack up the number of the positives. And this has been previously used to improve class imbalance in other short document domains. In our work, we used a combination of both uncertainty sampling and minority class certainty sampling. So overall, our active learning pipeline looks like this. So we have a small set of example comments that is like 6 positive subclasses for help speech and 5 negative subclasses for help speech, 1 for each of them. Then we perform nearest neighbor active sampling. And in that we have 38 positive and 273 negative. Then we perform 1 round of random sampling to improve diversity. We can still see that there is a huge gap between the number of positives and number of negatives. Then we do a round of certainty sampling to tackle class imbalance. So you can see now the gap has been breached quite substantially. And finally, we do 1 round of uncertainty sampling. And after this round, we have roughly equal number of positives and negatives in our data set. So now we have a balanced data set. So when we train a classifier, we used a very simple SVM classifier with a unigram, bigram, and trigram as features. This is a small data problem, so SVM is a reasonable choice. And we found that as we expanded our data set, the F1 score steadily improved. It is possible to squeeze more performance out of the data set. For example, if we, instead of just using SVM trained with n-grams as features, if we train SVM with n-grams and the embeddings as features, we can see that for precision, recall, accuracy, and F1 score, along all dimensions, the performance improves. But we were not focused on squeezing performance out of like a training data set and the test data set. We were more interested in seeing how does it perform in the wild. So we focused on the data set that is neither part of the training nor part of the test. And we run our help speech classifier, identified top 100 comments predicted as help speech. And then when we manually annotated them, we found that human annotation identified 88 of them as positives. Recall that random sampling just yielded 10%, like nearly 11% as positives. So our method can substantially reduce web moderation. So if this tool is available to some web moderator, she will have a much easier time detecting help speech. Now it depends on her how she wants to surface it. Like there are many moderation communities where you can pin certain comments or you can highlight certain comments, but she now has access to a tool that can detect this help speech. We were also interested in seeing what kind of help speech we found. So we did a diversity analysis and we found that of all the 6 different categories, subcategories of help speech, like expressing sympathy, condemning the alleged oppressor, vocalizing for their rights, humanitarian call, appeal to organizations, and active help, we have examples in all these subclasses. So our classifier can actually has a very, it can select a diverse set of help speech comments. Now I would like to pause for a minute so that we can get to read this comment. This is an example help speech that we found in the wild. So you can see the word citizenship, ethnic cleansing, criminal court, even the word help is spelled incorrectly. And then there are a lot of spelling and grammar disfluencies in the comment. We suspect that this is most likely a comment written by a Rohingya refugee. And the fact that our help speech classifier was able to detect this comment indicates that it holds promise in performing well in the wild. Now, this comment actually raised some interesting points. Keep helping these poor innocent people. The Myanmar government is really kind of like animals. And both of our annotators marked this as positive, as like help speech. And we asked them why. And their response was, assuming that the genocide happened for real, some measured expression of anger is expected. But now the question is, where can we draw the line if help speech starts having hate speech against some other communities? How much do we allow? And the even deeper philosophical question is, who gets to draw this line? So whenever we have any content filtering algorithm, the task of annotation is very difficult to design. And there are many work in hate speech detection, which talks about why and how it is difficult to design annotation scheme to define what is hate speech and what is not. We also see there is a similar problem in help speech as well. Like if help speech starts having containing hate speech against some other communities, how much of it we can allow, or like how to come up with better annotation scheme so that this doesn't happen. So to sum up with the first part of this talk, the main takeaways are we talked about a different aspect of web vulnerability of marginalized communities. That is the sparsity of pro-minority voices championing their cause. We looked into AI's possible role in addressing this. We emphasized that hate speech and help speech serve two different goals. Both are very important. We found that embedding-based methods hold promise in tackling noisy social media data, and combining active learning and active sampling strategies can effectively tackle class imbalance.
Oh,
So
a clarification question in the chat.
Yes.
Han, sorry I missed it, but could you please discuss how you handle spelling errors like V and help again?
So if we took skipgram embedding with subword information. So if words have like subtle, like some spelling variation, but the structure of the word is similar to the actually spelled word, they will roughly appear in similar context, and then the embeddings will be close by. So that's how we handled spelling variations. All right. So now comes the question. We looked into one direction of amplifying the positives. What could be some broader applicability of this general framework? So we focused on another domain, that is heated online discussions between civilians of nuclear adversaries. And we focused on India and Pakistan. Again, our choice of platform was YouTube, because in the subcontinent, that's the most popular social media platform. And the research question is, can AI help in detecting peace-seeking, hostility-diffusing content? So when two countries are at the brink of declaring a full-fledged war, and civilians of each of these countries are calling for the other country's civilians, calling for their head, they're saying like we should nuke each other or something like that. It's not enough to detect hate speech alone. It's very important to detect peace-seeking, hostility-diffusing content also. So that's our second task. And now it's a quick recap of the 2019 crisis that happened in the month of February between India and Pakistan. So it started on 14th Feb when a suicide bomber attack happened in Kashmir, killing many Indian soldiers. Soon after that, diplomatic escalation started happening. And then India reported that they conducted an airstrike in Pakistan, and an Indian wing commander got captured by Pakistan Air Force, Pakistan military. So the two countries came precariously close to declaring a full-fledged war, up until the captured wing commander was released by Pakistan Prime Minister. The tension subdued for a while, but India and Pakistan, they have a long history of acrimonious past. So the reason I put the date as like 14th September 2020, which means like it's still an ongoing issue. And Kashmir is a disputed region since the inception of the two countries. These two countries have gone on to 4 full-blown wars and many skirmishes. Both countries are nuclear powers. And a recent study reports that a full-blown war may have as many as 100 million deaths. So this tension between these two countries was there for last 70 years. Our paper was the first paper that conducted a web scale analysis of the web manifestation of a conflict involving India and Pakistan. So we focused on a data set of 2 million comments on close to 3,000 YouTube videos relevant to the Pulwama terror attack. We focused on a date range of Feb 14th, 2019 to March 14th, 2019. And again, we used LPolyglot to extract the English comments. So this is the visualization of a two-dimensional TSNE plot of the embedding space. And again, you can see that there are 3 clusters. And we just had to annotate 30 comments to process these 2.4 million comments to extract the English out. So it's very annotation efficient. And we had similar linguistic challenges. 32% of the time, liar was misspelled as L-I-E-R. And there is an example comment you can see, thank you, Pakistan, for humanity, no war. You can see a lot of phonetic spelling errors. Pakistan is also spelled incorrectly. So all the spelling and grammar disfluency challenges we had before, it was also present in this data set. So this brings us to our another task of Hope speech classification. So Hope speech classifier is a nuanced classifier that detects hostility diffusing content. And again, it has different subclasses. It could be a comment that expresses peace-seeking intent. We want peace, an example comment. It could be a comment that talks about the humanitarian cost of war. Peace is better than war, as the price of war is death of innocent peoples. It could be appreciation for your neighboring country. I'm from Pakistan, I love India and Indian people. And we use similar methods to train our Hope speech classifier. But again, we were interested in evaluating the performance in the wild. So in this particular context, random sampling yields roughly 2.5% Hope speech. So Hope speech was even more rare than help speech. And our classifier is 84.7% precision. So which means, again, substantial improvement in web moderation. And we performed a similar diversity analysis, and we found that our classifier was able to find Hope speech of different subclasses in the wild. So these are some example comments, some example Hope speech we found in the wild. The bottommost one is very interesting. In peace, sons bury their fathers. In war, fathers bury their sons. This was originally from Herodotus, some 2,500 years back. And the fact that some anonymous YouTube user is reproducing that comment after 2,500 years tells us that as humanity, we haven't made much progress in understanding and realizing the futility of war. So this is an important social science result that we found in our work. So we did a thorough temporal analysis of peace-seeking and war-seeking intent over the time. And we created a comprehensive lexicon of intent phrases to label each comment as peace-seeking or war-seeking or neutral. So you can see that when the crisis erupted around February 4th, the war-seeking intent was dominating the peace-seeking intent. But when the two countries came precariously close to declaring war around February 26th, 27th, and 28th, the peace-seeking intent was really dominating the war-seeking intent. And if you can see the top level figures where we plot the comment activity over time, you can also see that there is a huge surge in activity when the two countries came precariously close to declaring a war. So it's just one data point. So we don't know if this is a general phenomena, but at least for this particular conflict's context, we figured out that when the threats of war became imminent, common people across both aisles, like both from Pakistan and India, tended to gravitate towards peace. So this is a very important result to think about. And it's kind of reassuring to think that humanity in general maybe thinks peace is better than war. Now we come to our third part of the talk. So we have so far focused on how to detect hope speech or help speech in English. But English is not the only language that is spoken in India. Hindi is spoken by more than 450 million people combining India and Pakistan. How can we extend resources so that we can also detect hope speech in Hindi? So take this simple comment. The top one says, "Main aman chahta hu, khuda ke waaste jang nahi." And the bottom one says, "I love India, I am Pakistani, peace, peace, peace." So for the people who do not understand Hindi, "Main aman chahta hu, khuda ke waaste jang nahi" would probably mean nothing. But "I love India, I am Pakistani, peace, peace, peace," you can have a sense that this is a conciliatory comment. Now the fun part is, this is actually the same comment. "I love India, I am Pakistani, main aman chahta hu, khuda ke waaste jang nahi," peace, peace, peace. And मैं अमन चाहता हूँ खुदा के वास्ते जंग नहीं translates to I want peace for God's sake. So this is an example of code switching, that is seamless transition of languages within the same document boundary. And it is typically looked at as an obstacle to downstream analysis. But if we carefully look at this example, a short document is likely to express a consistent sentiment. So even though if I don't understand मैं अमन चाहता हूँ खुदा के वास्ते जंग नहीं, from the English part, I can have an educated guess that maybe that part is also saying something peace seeking. So there could be some sentiment parallelism. And the research question is, can we harness code switching to perform cross-lingual sampling for social good? So the key idea is, if we have a linguistic separator that can extract the Hindi out of this kind of code mixed document, code mixed hope speech, I can then perform nearest neighbor sampling with the extracted Hindi in the Hindi document embedding space. I can just say that find me something that is similar to मैं अमन चाहता हूँ खुदा के वास्ते जंग नहीं, and chances are high that I'll find some peace-seeking comment. So this will be there will be a boost in my sampling performance. So essentially, what we are suggesting that we are using code switching as a bridge. So consider we have a document level sampler of code switched comments, so we can detect if a comment is code switched or not, and we have a precise word level language identifier that will allow us to extract the Hindi out of a code switched Hindi English document. And then what we can do is we can sample code switched documents that exhibits hope speech, and then we can extract the Hindi, and then we can perform nearest neighbor sampling. So let's go back to our old example. And before that, I would just mention that our L polyglot technique, the language identifier we use to detect documents, it also works well at the word level. So we used this to sample documents with substantial code mixing, and also we used this L polyglot to extract the Hindi out of the English Hindi code switched example. So say I love India, I am Pakistani, मैं अमन चाहता हूँ खुदा के वास्ते जंग नहीं, peace, peace, peace. Our extraction, Hindi extraction system extracts मैं अमन चाहता हूँ खुदा के जंग नहीं. It thinks vaste is west. So it makes one mistake, but it still is able to extract noisily the Hindi portion of this comment. And then when we perform nearest neighbor sampling, we can find an example comment which translates to I am a Rajput, I never want fight between the two countries. We were one country before the partition, only a handful of extremists want bloodshed. So visually, this is how it looks like. This is again a two-dimensional representation of the multidimensional embedding space. The blue region is the comments in English. The red is comments in Romanized Hindi. The black region is the code switch region. And then the magenta triangles are code mixed hope speech. But once you extract Hindi out of it and perform nearest neighbor sampling, you see the hope speech that you obtain, they are mostly placed in the purely Hindi region. So we are effectively able to transcend the linguistic barrier using this code switching as a bridge. So recall that random sampling in the Hindi region, it yields even less than 2% hope speech. And with our sampling method, we got like 23%. So there is a 10-fold performance improvement, which just comes for free. We don't need any Hindi hope speech classifier. All that we need is an English hope speech classifier and a reliable linguistic separator. And then we can just sample the Hindi out of English hope speech, in code switch English Hindi hope speech comment. And then we can just perform nearest neighbor sampling. Now, in the case of COVID, we may not have a content classifier to start with. Suppose we are talking about COVID-19 health compliance, and the classifier definition will keep on changing. And can we even detect Hindi content when we don't have a English content classifier? So here is how we do it. Say we start with an English comment, we should maintain social distancing. And we try to find nearest neighbor that are code mixed, but when we compute the nearest neighbor, we only focus on the Hindi part of the comment. So in this case, we compute the distance between obeying social distance is important and we should maintain social distancing. We find that they are close by, we select that comment. Now, once we have selected this code mixed comment, we forget about the English part. We focus on the Hindi part. Ghar pe raho, bhai logo, bahar mat jao. And then we say, okay, take this Hindi part and try to find comments that are similar to this Hindi part. And then we find something which says that don't just roam around outside in large groups. That's a Hindi comment. So effectively, this is almost like a chained database query where the English part is forming one part of the key and the Hindi part is forming another part of the key. And you are just using this code switching phenomena and your linguistic separator to detect content even in absence of a content classifier. So using this technique, we found more than 5 times more positives that express compliance to CDC guidelines. The reason this work is very important is because typically the low resource languages, high resource languages, these are often guided by economic and financial power. But when a pandemic happens, whichever places are very densely populated, the languages in those places will be suddenly very important because we have to disseminate resources in those languages in order to reach out to more people so that the pandemic can be contained. So the fact that we can work even without relying on English content classifier, it shows that code switching can be a very powerful tool to sample content. Now, the big picture of the whole talk is, we talked about a framework novelty of amplifying the positives as opposed to just blocking the hate. We introduced L Polyglot. The software is publicly available, and anyone who wants to work on like South Asian social science issues involving text data, please try this tool out. It's very useful. We also have a different paper where we worked on 2019 Indian general election. There we had 9 regional languages to deal with, and L Polyglot was extremely effective to extract the English out of that data set. We found that active sampling is a very useful sampling technique, and it was useful in Rohingya refugee crisis and India-Pakistan conflict, both the problems. And finally, we found that code switching can be harnessed for social good. So as I was presenting this work, I have been working very closely with Jaime for the last 9 years, and yeah, it's very hard. So we had many interesting discussions surrounding chess, poetry, and machine learning. So we were very passionate chess players. So we shared many chess discussions, and every time I had a game against, say, an international master or national master, I will show him the game. And most of the times, actually, the mistake that the national master or the international master made, Jaime would not make that mistake. He would just say, no, I would play a different move. So we had many discussions around that. And then on poetry, when I wrote my second collection of poems, I dedicated to 2 teachers who influenced me the most. So I dedicated that book to Jaime and Manuel. And I asked him that, do you have any student who dedicated a book of poems? He said, no, you're the first one. And then he mentioned that he once translated a Spanish collection of poems. So I was very, very intrigued and surprised by knowing that, gosh, I mean, there is not a single intellectual pursuit that this person hasn't explored. And we, of course, has a lot of discussions on machine learning. When we were working on these projects, Jaime was going through a massive health struggle. And he was very passionate about these lines of work. To an extent, I mean, the help speech and hope speech, both names were coined by him. I'm really happy that he could see some of the work getting published, and the press release happened while he was still there. He was very proud of the Ichkai paper on code switching, but he could not. He saw that getting submitted, and he said that, Ashik, this is a very strong paper. It's definitely going to get in, and the idea is very intriguing to use code switching to perform cross-lingual sampling, but he could not see getting that accepted. These lines of work was very close to his heart, and when I was doing my PhD, I was meeting him once in a week or once in 2 weeks, but during this time, I was meeting him twice or thrice every week. So it was extremely, he was deeply passionate about this kind of work. Now, how am I continuing Jaime's research legacy? So we have a new paper on arXiv. It's a joint work with me, Srifani Palakodeti, and Tom Mitchell. And in this work, we have shown that we can use constrained nearest neighbor sampling in the polyglot word embedding space, and we can actually perform unsupervised word translation. And once we do that, we can actually construct a noisy translated document embedding. And then when we do nearest neighbor sampling in the document embedding space with this fictitiously translated document embeddings, we perform better than this code switching method, and we have improved this technique by even like 45%. So that's our paper. It's on arXiv. You can take a look at it. And then I'm very fortunate to have the extended CMU family, who were extremely supportive and took me under their wings. So this is a course that I'm offering this semester, and I'm really fortunate that I'm co-teaching this with Mark Hamlet and Tom Mitchell. It's a course on tracking political sentiments using machine learning. You don't need to have nuclear adversaries bickering to think about the importance of hostility diffusion or finding a middle ground or finding peace-seeking content. You can just think about the current political scenario. I mean, like when the Democrats and the Republicans, they are not even seeing eye to eye. I mean, they have pretty much almost zero common ground if you look at any web discussion of the two political parties. And a big goal in this course is like, we would like to find if there is any middle voice, or if we can think like some kind of harmony speech where we can bring the two political parties together. And that's this course is about. I hope you found our work interesting, and I would be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Everybody can either turn on your audio and clap, or do the electronic clapping. Thank you very much. And also thank you for honoring Jaime in that way, showing the great impact of your work with him, and also continuing his legacy.